We did find out that KRL was financed
Yeah, I bet.
It's 5 o'clock. It's time to call our meeting to order at this time. And I think Mr. Wilson's going to do our invocation for us.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this day. We're thankful, Lord, for the blessings that we have received. Father, help us to think about them in our minds and our hearts, reflect on them, and use them, Father, to help us to grow in your grace. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for the ones that are here tonight. We thank you for this meeting. We thank you, Lord, for us as a board, and we just pray that you would lead us and guide us and direct us. For we ask this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Grace?
All right. Thank you for being here, those that came tonight. We had this is our second required meeting, and so we had one this morning at 11 o'clock. There are a few folks here. I know 11 o'clock is a little harder to get to because of work and different things. But the state sets these, and it's not up to us to set the time and the date. It's up to us to set the parameters, and then the state sets the times. And so we'll have another one next Thursday that's scheduled. It'll be at our AEC location in Chickamauga, and it will be at 6 o'clock. We go through the presentation. And then at the very end of the presentation, there will be a time for questions, and so we'll open up the floor at that point for any questions. So if you'll make yourself a note, if you see something during the presentation that strikes your interest, then we can discuss that at the very end. I always like to give a little context before we start the presentation, and so we'll go back through a little bit of our budget presentation from this year as we approve the budget, and then you'll see the connections to the millage rate and what the board is considering this season, and then again next Thursday. Every decision that the board makes always goes back to our mission and vision, which is ensuring all students graduate ready for college, ready for work, ready for life. I always like to make sure that the board is always recognized for what they do, and make sure that they know, and that folks that are visiting with us know, that every decision they make, financially especially, has to do with the betterment of our students, and so we always appreciate that. I'll go through a little bit of what revenue sources are for the school system when we're building a budget. Local funding, obviously the property taxes would be the one that most folks are interested in, but you can see the other, the basic education. That's a formula that started in 1985, hasn't changed since 1985. There are categorical grants, equalization, and then we get federal funding as well. It's very strict on how you can spend those dollars, but that's what makes up our revenue sources. I always point out QBE was set up to get 60% of its funds from the state and 40% from the local, and so you'll see a little bit about that as we go on through the presentation. eSPLOST, if you know anything about eSPLOST, it's an education special purpose local option sales tax. It's been in place since 1997. It has to be approved every time every 5 years, or a referendum to have that earlier. It's 1 cent on every anything that's sold comes back to the school system. It's very focused on, and we came up with a nice little term there: buildings, bonds, books, buses, and bits and bytes. That's all you can spend that money on. It can't be spent on general funds. It can't be mixed into those. It has to be kept separate. And most people, when they drive around the system and they look at our 15 school buildings and our multiple offices, they see how well those SPLOST funds are at work for them. ESSER funds, which came during COVID, we were the beneficiary of quite a bit of money, and it was spent on the mitigation of the effects of COVID, which at the beginning was all about sanitation and the things that were associated with the disease itself, and then it moved into, because of the impact on schools, how are you going to address learning loss? And so we had several things that we listed showing how we spent those funds. Those funds have been audited once with our audit, and there was no findings in those audits, and so we're very proud of the fact that our school system now, at least for the past probably 35 to 40 years, has never had an audit finding when the Department of Revenue is looking at our audit. So that's a good place to be. But those funds were also mixed into our budget prep. And then we moved some items from the general budget into ESSER that were allowable, and you can see those listed up there. And then that all has come back into the general fund budget this year. That was about $2.2 million. So the QBE funding is quality basic education. And we get that in equal payments of 12 payments a year. Again, I mentioned the 60-40 split. QBE is based on the number of students we serve and how we serve them. And so we have become very accomplished in knowing how to serve our students, but also maximizing that funding formula from 1985. And so that also helped in that 60-40 split. A lot of folks don't realize that there is no funding that comes from the state for these positions up here. The one that probably jumps out the most that we use a lot, because our legislature this past year stated that they fully funded education again, and they used transportation as their example. And we always like to point out that the state funds less than 20% of total transportation costs. So locally, we add in an additional about $4.5 million a year just to fund our transportation department. And so that's a legislature issue that we continue to talk about with our elected officials. Inflation, obviously inflation is hitting us all, but the school system is not immune to those costs. Our fuel prices go up, our utility prices go up, food costs are going up, so we're still not immune to the impacts of inflation. Here are some things that were added to the budget this year. The governor gave our teachers another raise, and so that's about $2.7 million. Our certificated folks, if they're on the experience scale, every other year they get a step up to a certain number of years. That costs us about $1 million a year. Our non-certificated folks, the board agreed to give them a $1 an hour raise plus a step if they're eligible. That was well received by our folks as well. So a couple of things that impacted what we'll spend this year. State health benefits is probably the one that increased the most. It's gone up 67% one year and went up 11% again this year. So we're currently paying $21,120 per year per employee who holds a certificate. That's all of our teachers, that's all of our administrators. That's just to offer them insurance. And then their plan is on top of that what they pay for their premium. That increase is costing us quite a bit more every year in our general fund budget. Then if you look at our non-certificated folks, theirs is going from $13,340 to $17,420. Theirs has gone up 18% last year, and it increased another 31% this year, and it's scheduled to go up to that $21,120 next year. And so just the additional cost of just offering health insurance to our folks. TRS is a recruitment tool we use in education. Most folks don't understand TRS. It's a retirement system where the employee can put in 6%, but the system is actually putting in 20.78% every year for them. And so what happened in 2008, 2009, a lot of teachers left the field of education because of the recession. We haven't built back to that same number. And so in an effort to keep that retirement system solvent and to keep those folks that are retired getting their checks, our percentage increased dramatically. And I know when I started here 12 years ago, it was about 11%. So it's grown exponentially over the years. But we also use that to try to recruit new teachers, because once you start seeing the value of working for 30 years in education at a lesser pay, but that retirement system is a very beneficial thing. So our general fund revenue, local revenues at $36.8 million, state at $79.6, other sources which included those categorical grants and anything from the federal government, another $2 million, for a total revenue of $118.4 million that is expected or projected to come in this year. When you look at how that money is broken down, you can see the large red area is the QBE and our equalization that we receive. And I'll talk more about equalization in just a minute. But you can see, if you remember back that 60-40 split, we're actually getting more money from the state, 67%, and less money from the local revenue at 31%. We like that balance. We feel like that's good for our tax base. It's also good for our students because we're maximizing that funding. And then equalization is a piece that's connected to millage, and we'll talk about that in just a second as well. That's a breakdown of how we spend our money, and you can see the largest one, the 66%. That's instructional services. That's where our money goes back into the schools for things for our students, for our teachers, for our administrators. And so we try to put the lion's share of our funding back into the buildings where it makes the most difference. And then this is our general fund expenditure budget. So our budget is 88%. It's actually right at 89% of our total budget is in personnel. It's made up of people. And so that's $111 million. The 12% is our operating expenses. And folks always say, well, you need to cut your budget. You can cut your budget in certain places. And there is some truth to that. You have two options. You can lay people off, or you can cut your operations. Well, our fuel costs and our utilities are going up just like everyone else. And so those costs are fixed. So there's not a lot of room for cut in the red area. The only other place to cut would be in personnel. And again, we'll talk a little more about that in just a second. This wraps up kind of what the budget looks like. We're starting off with about a $30 million fund balance, and we'll end up with a total budget of $148.7 million. And you can see, based on that graph there, we're going to use about $8 million out of our fund balance this year, our reserves, to balance our budget. And that's something we have to continue to look at, because that fund balance has to stay at a certain place in order to make payroll every month, and so we continue to try to do that. I say all that to give you context about the budget building process and how that ties directly into the local millage rate. So we'll go into the millage history. So from 2005 to 2008, the millage rate was at 17.55. In 2009, it was rolled back to the 17.45. And then from 2010, it rolled back to 17.404, and it stayed there for the next 5 years, to 2015. We rolled back, and when I say we, this is the board's decision to make this, to set the millage rate. We rolled back in 16 to 16.631. Again in 17 to 16.622. And then in 18 to 16.619. So the board rolled back for 3 consecutive years. In 19, they moved back to the former rate of 17.404. And if you remember, in 19, we were going into the impacts of COVID, and so our projections were showing us that your revenue was going to take a major hit going into the next year. The prediction was, and so we adjusted. In 2020 and 21, we maintained that 17.404. In 22, post-COVID, the state began to look at, across Georgia, the property values in every county. And they were basing that on the Department of Revenue and how homes were selling across the nation. And so all property in Walker County was reassessed at a very high rate, and that was in 22. Based on that, the board chose to reduce, I always say the wrong thing, reduce the millage rate to 16.404. So they reduced a full mill because of those higher assessed property values. Your property is supposed to be assessed every 3 years, but we've had properties now assessed for the past 3 years in a row. It's supposed to be assessed every third year. We've had people that had their property assessed every year so far. So that happened again in 2023. So the board made the decision to lower that rate to 14.982 to offset some of those increases. So that brings us to where we are. The law requires we advertise. The law requires we set them at 3 specific times that they give us. And then when you advertise that, because you're not taking the rollback amount that's given by the tax assessor's office, this has to be advertised as an increase in property tax. It's considered a tax increase. So the tax digest that shows the 14.982, it would show an additional $3 million for revenue for the school system based on that number. So how do we compare? So we just took the closest counties to us and looked at theirs from 2016 all the way up into their proposed rate of 2024. You can see Walker County's been right in the mix for a while, and then when we went down to 14,982, you can see we were one of the lowest millage rates around us.
Where's Dade County?
We don't have
Dade County, Chattooga County, counties is close to
and we're going to have
Walker
questions at the very end, so I appreciate that. I don't speak for Dade County or Chattooga, but I can speak for those. I do know that we had, and I'm going to pull my form up here because there was a change in Catoosa. They actually voted. They had a proposed rate of 15.040, and they lowered theirs to 14.870. So that puts them a little lower than us at this point. But you can see we're still one of the lowest rates for systems around us, counties around us. Talked a little bit about that. We talked about the QBE. And the thing I want to mention is about equalization. So equalization is a formula at the Department of Education. They take, from all 159 counties, they take the equivalent of 5 mil from their earnings. So it's taken off the top. 5 mils for us is a little more than $8 million. We send that back to the DOE. They put it in an account. And then by formula, they redistribute that wealth back out, that money back out. And it's because of counties that their property values are lower. And so they're trying to equalize the playing field for all the students in those counties. Walker County's been the beneficiary of that for a number of years. And to the tune of last year, we were at, well, I've got it on the form here just a second. I think I'll pull it up real quick and show you. Last year we were at a little more than $8 million. A little more than $9.5 million. This past year we were already projecting that we were going to lose $1 million in equalization because we've rolled back so many times. The state then decided to take money out of the coffers and put it into this formula, and so we actually received $12.8 million. And it's important because I want to show, as we're talking through this in just a second, what the impact is when we continue to lower that rate. So if the rate goes below 14 mils, or the equivalent rate goes below 14 mils, then the system loses the ability to get any of the equalization money. So for us, if we drop to the rollback rate this year, which is 13.988, I think, Angela, is we would then, in 2 years, we would lose that $12 million. Still going to have to send back the equivalent of 5 mil, that $8 million, but we're not going to get anything to offset that loss. And so that's why we have to really look at where we are, what we're collecting, and then how do we keep from losing those equalization funds. We've got the OCGA that talks a little bit about that. This is what the mill rate looked like from 2020 all the way up to 23. So on the left-hand side, you see the actual millage rate, but then based on collections, you can see what the effective rate was. So a 17,404 in 2020 was actually 16.69. And then you can follow that down, and we were already calculating what does 14.982 look like as an equivalent or effective rate. And we had already looked at that, and we knew it was going to be quite a bit lower. So our projections were almost spot on because we were going to lose a little more than $1 million. We didn't because of the influx of the cash from them. That just shows you what the 5 mil share is, and you can see from 2021, it went from $6,568,000 to where it was this past year, which is $8.2 million. That 5 mil goes back every year. You don't have a choice there. They take that money. Then they send that to some other district potentially. Our fear is that we have benefited, our students have benefited from the equalization fund. It's offered more programming. It's offered more opportunities. But if we lose it, Walker County has been sending the equivalent of 5 mil to that fund, and it's going to some other county to be used on their students and not on our students. And so we definitely want to make sure that we're continuing to look at our budget, make sure that we keep that millage rate at a certain point to benefit from the equalization. Property owners that won't see a change this year is if their property was not reassessed. There were some folks this year that their property was not reassessed. Because the millage rate was $14,982 last year, then their property taxes should remain the same. Since we're not taking that $13.988, by law, we have to calculate a couple of examples to show the general public so that they'll kind of understand what the difference is in the taxable amount on a rollback and the taxable amount on a reduction. And so those are the examples that we'll give you next. So if you're looking at a home with a fair market value of $225,000, and again, these are given to us. We don't pick and choose the examples. They give us the examples as part of the law that talks about these needs. So $225,000, it's assessed at 40%, so the value then would be $90,000. If you have the homestead exemption, that's a $2,000 decrease. So now you're at $88,000, and then you do the math across at $14,982, which is the rate that the board is positioned to hold. That means property tax for the school system on that mill rate is $1,318.42. If you do the same calculation and take the rollback amount of the $13.988, the property tax would be $1,230.94. So that's a tax increase or a difference in $87.48 or $7.29 a month on that example. So if that was similar to what you currently have as your home and you have a homestead exemption, then you're going to see, based on this millage rate, you're going to see an $87.48 increase on your property taxes for this particular year. Again, that has a huge impact on equalization. The other example that we're required to give is a non-homestead property with a fair market value of $150,000. If it's assessed at 40%, that's $60,000. Then you do the math times the $14,982, which is the mill rate we're considering. That would mean the property taxes for the school system would be $898.92. If you do that same calculation for the rollback amount at $13,988, the property tax would be $839.28. So that's a difference of $59.64 or $4.97 per month. So the calculations are just to show the comparison between where we're proposing, what the rollback amount would look like, and the difference. And then to try to offer some level of explanation about the equalization amount that potentially we would lose. If we lose our equalization, and I used this example this morning, if we lose our equalization, we still give back the 5 mil share, so that $8.2 million goes back to the fund, and then we lose out on potentially that $12 million. So we did a calculation on what does that look like. Okay, you saw that our operating expenses were $14 million. So you can't take $12 million out of that, then you don't have fuel, you don't have the lights on, you don't have conditioned air. So you have to take it out of the other side, which is your personnel. So for $12 million, that equates to somewhere between 48 and 52 teacher salaries. Okay, and that's based on a brand new teacher. So you would lose that many people out of your building. And the suggestion I always make to folks as I talk about that is, so when we start cutting, we're going to start with your child's teacher or the program your child loves the best. And they go, I don't want you to do that. I want you to cut it at another school. It doesn't work like that. You have to look at 15 schools, and then you're starting to lose people in programs. Those people in programs have taken our graduation rate from in the 50s to in the mid-90s right now. And so we want to do everything we can to utilize that additional $12 million to truly equalize the opportunities that we're providing for our students. That's important to us, and I know that's important to the board. But it is a difficult conversation because it's mixed in with taxes. And so I know sometimes it's hard to make that comparison, but we try to do that best we can. That's the presentation. It goes back to our budget, it talks about where we're looking at the millage rate. And so I'll open it up for questions, and again, I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. That's always a good thing for folks to come out. But we'll answer any questions that we can answer for you. I've got our finance person here as well. And then the board may have things that they want to share. I guess I'll start with you guys. Do you have any questions at this point about the presentation or about anything that we've already talked about a couple of times? Okay. Question? Yes, sir.
First of all, who are you? What is your title?
I'm the school superintendent, Damon Raines.
Superintendent of Walker County.
Yes, sir.
Why did you decide to skill the counties that was beside Walker County?
So we didn't get information from Chattooga, and Dade County, the way they do their property values and assessments right now, I think is a little different than Walker County.
But,
So it's not a good comparison.
but now, when they pay, it should all be the same. I mean, you don't want to do it because their property values are lower, the same as Chattooga property values, or millage rate, is lower than Walker County's, or Floyd County, or Catoosa County right now is in the process of trying to raise theirs, 30 or 33%. They're having a meeting also.
Well, they reduced theirs as well, but their proposed millage rate was considered a tax increase because they didn't take the rollback amount, and it collected more revenue for them. So it was 30%. I don't know what the rollback amount was. It was 14.8 something. I don't know what that number as far as the dollar amount equals, but it would be less than that 30% that they advertised. So.
And where's the lotto money? Where does it go?
Lotto money hasn't come to the school system in years. It used to come for computers, a variety of things. It goes to pre-K and Hope Scholarship for folks when they leave us.
So they just let it go since it quit coming? Nobody found out why?
That we don't work for them, so I don't know what they do with that money. I know it's a lot of money just based on the signs that you see out there every week or so. But
when it started, it was for schools.
It sure was.
So why don't we travel that avenue, try to make up some money?
Yeah, and
because that's what it was for.
Sure. I agree with you 100%. We get it for pre-K, and then they provide scholarships for folks when they leave, but they don't do anything in the middle. Yeah. And that's been, I don't know, that's probably been 15 years, maybe. Yeah, at least that long that they stopped giving anything in the middle. And I think it was technology, things like that.
When they just stopped, y'all just let it go, let it have you.
Oh, no. We went to our legislators and fought for that. Sure did. Yeah, just like we do for full funding. Every year I'm at the Capitol talking to my elected officials about, hey, we're not getting, you say fully funding, but you're not fully funding it. We go down there every year and talk.
I mean, and you say you've got our kids' best interest in heart and teaching them and stuff, but when you sit here and you take, like this meeting right now, you said you didn't do it, it's our state. So we need to complain to our state. We have a job. We couldn't make it to the one at 11 o'clock. A lot of people couldn't make it here because they don't get off to 5:30 in the afternoon. And where does that put them? The working people that own property cannot even be at this meeting.
That's why we offer an 11 o'clock, a 5 o'clock, and a 6 o'clock. Yes, ma'am.
And then when they do, most businesses, if you take off, it's either a point or a half a point. So many points, you're hitting the door, you're fired.
Yeah.
I mean, where does that take in consideration for the citizens of Walker County?
So on our website, this presentation is up, and all of this information has been posted for several weeks. So folks can review it, and if they want to call in, we're always willing to sit down and have that conversation with them and answer their questions. And so we're trying to give them as many opportunities to see the information and give input based on those situations, because I have a lot of folks that I know that work at Roper, and they can't get off at this time. And so that gives them at least another option to review it and to ask questions as well.
And just like any other school system, a lot of other different school systems, why can't they have the 401B for their instead of them taking money out for their retirement? In other words, I mean,
so non-certificated have the public school retirement system, which is a 403B. I think that's the title of it. It's a different retirement system. It's been like that for years. Teacher retirement has always been that because teachers give up what they make on the front end to get to something that they get during their retirement. And so it's more of a, it's like a ministry for them to come into education, but they do lack in pay before they get to that retirement. And the retirement is a good retirement for them. So for them to work 30 years and make life-changing things for students around them, the benefit for them is in the retirement.
Yeah, they still get paid.
They
while
do.
they're off from work. I mean, when they.
Well,
when
they
they're
get
paying,
their
they still
pay
get
is
paid
divided by 12 because we have to pay for their benefits every month. So they make less every month, but they have to divide it over 12 months because we have to pay their benefits all year long. So it's a little different for them. They're not working during that 11 weeks during the summer. It used to be that people thought summer was 3 months off. It's not 3 months. It's about 11 weeks that they're paid during that time, but they take lesser pay every month in order for us to split that up and pay their benefits every month. So,
another thing, people that is retired and don't have grandkids, great-grandkids, or great-great-grandkids in school, we still have to pay the taxes. Why is that? Because we shouldn't have to.
So we don't set tax law. That's not what we do at all. We just set a millage rate based on the property values that brings revenue to the school system. We don't make those laws. That's somebody else that does that. We just operate inside those laws. The other thing is school systems, good school systems, make communities better. They make people want to move there and come into those school systems. And so we continue to do that. So even those folks that don't have children in the system is actually benefiting the greater community because it's a good school system and it attracts more people.
No, I don't know about that. I live right on 187. I got Day County on this side and Day County on this side, and I'm right in the corner. I want to know why can't we put that corner in Day County? I'd be so happy.
Yeah.
I don't like. I'm part of Walker County.
I don't think we should raise the millage rate. because
We're not raising it.
Well, we're here talking about.
Our millage rate was 14,982 last year. It's staying that this year. It just has to be advertised as a tax increase because we're not rolling back to the 13,988 that the tax assessors gave us on the form. So we're not raising the millage rate. We're maintaining the millage rate.
But the tax assessor's saying that it was not a 13.
The tax assessor, the rollback amount, which rollback means that you collect exactly this year what you collected last year if it stayed at 13,988. So your revenue doesn't increase at all. But what happens to us is if we go below 14 on the millage rate, we lose $12 million. And so we can't operate losing $12 million. And so we've got to balance where that millage rate falls to help out with the tax base, but also to make sure we continue to provide programming and people to serve our students.
In certain programs, does the government not offer grants that y'all could apply for?
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of doing this?
Yes, ma'am. And we take up every grant we get. You can see other state revenue. Those are categorical grants and federal dollars. And you can see it makes up 2% of our total budget. But we go after every grant that's out there. Even some that aren't listed through the Department of Education, we'll go after things like Georgia Power. We just got a grant from Georgia Power. Economic Development, we just got a grant from them. So we go after anything that's out there that would be money that would serve our students that's outside of all of this. But you can see it still only makes up 2% of what we're bringing in. Yes, ma'am.
And, you know, we're shy on bus drivers, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
But we're still holding all this money because, you know, they don't go around house to house anymore.
Right.
We have community stops and drops.
Yes, ma'am. But you saw, they said they funded totally funded transportation, but they don't. Even for what we're doing with community stops, we're still having to put in an additional $4 million just to pay those drivers. So,
Even being this short.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But ain't that dangerous community stops? Cause
Not at all. We've
I
been
know
doing it
one-
since
I
COVID,
know-
and they've worked flawlessly.
I know if the people that I know lives next door to me, if their kids got dropped off where they're supposed to be dropped off, that's over 1.5 miles to 2 miles away that they'd have to walk because their parents work. Now, well, ain't that dangerous?
Every situation is not perfect, but when you go from 92 drivers to 58 drivers, you've got to figure out a way to do that, and the community stops seem to be working really well. Other questions?
Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
is that $30 million that's in the fund balance, is that typical or?
So, that's a great question. So $30 million comes from how we spend our ESSER funds, because if you go pre-COVID, our fund balance was $8 million. It's supposed to be 15% of your expenditure budget for the next year. So that would run us somewhere between $14 and $16 million. We get a waiver because we knew we were going to have this influx. But if you look at the projections for the next 2 years, revenue is supposed to be down considerably in Georgia. So that's why we built that balance, because we knew, like this year, we're using $8 million to balance our budget. We can't keep doing that forever. But we knew that was coming, and so that's why we tried to get that to a point where it could help us for a couple of years if the revenue did fall. But that's a great question. The law is it's got to be 14 to 16%. Other questions?
I want to say something in general.
Sure.
A lot of these issues and stuff that we're talking about and asking questions about are kindly out of the local control. We've got to be a little bit more invested in what's going on with our legislators and what. And we have people that turn out for this, but they don't necessarily talk to their elected officials. And just like we was talking about the lottery, you know, used to, the schools got a lot of that, and you say that, and they are, some, giving money for scholarships, but they make that harder every year to get. I know a lot of pretty intelligent kids that no longer qualify.
Right.
So,
And if you lose it, it's hard to get it back, too, the process. Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that we don't have issues locally, but we got a lot of issues in Atlanta, Georgia.
And so we do that every year. We go down, the board members go down, I go down, the Superintendent's Association goes down. We have those conversations every year. So to your point, that's exactly right. There's a lack of understanding about truly funding school systems. And it's a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation we need to have.
The property tax assessment, and I can remember when it was every 3 to 4 years, and now all of a sudden, I don't know if the law changed or whatever, but you may get hit 3 or 4 years in a row. And I know that's not for you to answer, but those are some answers we need as a community. And we're no different than the other communities. Inflation and stuff is, I mean, people are stressed out about it.
And it's a unique balance for us, because I can't toss them under the bus, because I may need to go to them about something in the future that would require a help from them. And so we try to go at it from that perspective of showing them the numbers and then saying, how can you help us? Because your help helps everybody in our community. And it's a delicate conversation. It really is. Yeah. Other questions? Comments?
I guess it'd probably be safe to say that everybody is affected by inflation. School boards,
Yes, sir.
the public, the homes, the families, everybody has that happen to them. Some people have avenues to gain it back, such as me. You know, I mean, I am in good health, as far as I know. If my mortgage goes up or my school tax goes up, I say, well, I'll work a couple more hours. It don't matter what you apply that to. But when you get to a point that you can't do that, there's nobody in Walker County, I don't think, would say a word if you come out and said, we're going to have a 2% property tax increase because of inflation. We all realize that. We all see that. But from looking at it where the rubber meets the road, is last year we actually had an increase, did we not?
Well, we reduced the rate, but it's still, because we didn't take the rollback amount, it still has to be advertised, and it still is considered a tax increase.
But I'm saying actually what we paid out in property tax last year increased.
Yeah, mine did.
the value of your home increased, so the assessed value went up. So by formula, yes, you paid more.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
And that changes every year.
If you're reassessed.
But, well, yeah, but as we said, a lot of us are seeing.
Every year, sure, yeah.
The gauge is 3 years, but what's actually happening is every year. I mean, mine was reassessed.
Yeah.
I had a property tax increase last year, and we all know that we got a rebate through the state of Georgia that we actually didn't realize a lot of what happened. In other words, we got that rebate. See, this year the rebate's going to be gone. So what are we doing this year? Are we raising tax? I'm not talking about millage rate. I'm talking about where the rubber meets the road, what comes out of your pocketbook. I mean, in a word salad, you can explain it any way you want to. But what really matters is what comes out of Dale's pocket, what comes out of Ed's pocket. That's what we have to deal with. You know, from looking at that, it would be easy to say that we didn't have an increase last year and we're not having one this year, but that's not reality.
Right.
That's a word salad.
I mean, that's not the salad I used either. I explained that we're not taking the rollback amount, which would mean the revenue stays the same, yours goes down to a lower rate, and you're not paying anymore. I didn't say that at the beginning. I said
so
we're not.
Taxes is not going to go up.
The examples I gave you on the 225,000, 150,000, you saw they are going up because we didn't take the rollback, but we reduced last year and we're holding this year. And by law, it's considered a tax increase because it's going to cost you if you were reassessed. If you weren't reassessed, the same millage rate applies. Your tax amount is the exact same thing it was last year.
But what's going to happen to people that's on a fixed income and it's very fixed?
Yes.
I mean, very fixed.
Yes, ma'am. And we have that conversation every year. Yes, that's why I think what Mr. Team said is that's a conversation we need to continue to have with legislators about how this is affecting us community-wide, and is there another solution?
I paid my place off because I knew I was going to be disabled and then now retirement. And I'm a widow. And I don't have a whole lot of money coming in. But y'all keep raising my taxes. And I mean, I paid my place off so I wouldn't have to pay so much. I mean, it hurts. Especially when you ain't got no income coming in, but just a little bit of money.
Sure.
And I don't have grandkids or great-grandkids or anything else. And I still have to pay it. But it hurts me, not y'all or nobody else, but me, my pocket. I got what am I going to do? Eat beans and potatoes the rest of my life? That's what I ate last night.
Well, your property value went up, right?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, all right. And so we don't have any control over the value. That's the one thing we don't control.
Not the value. It's still the same. It's just, I live in a house that's over 100 years old, that wind blows through in the wintertime. To me, it ain't no different.
I understand your point, and I appreciate you sharing your
situation.
situation.
And I can't fix it up because I don't have the money.
Sure.
And I'm not asking nobody to do it because it's fine.
Yeah.
I would like to have a little bit so I can put a little bit in it. You know, I'm not asking for y'all to not pay taxes. I'm just asking you to quit raising them up so high. Mine went up almost $400 this past time. And that's a lot of money when you don't have it.
The hotel on the mountain, is it going to pay its fair share of this, or is the burden still going to fall on Walker County citizens to pay their taxes?
I don't know the particulars on the hotel up there. I truly don't.
And
I know the sales tax from folks coming in, that the communities will benefit from that. Yes, ma'am.
Didn't they get a break and said the county, the citizens would pay the taxes on that hotel for 30 years?
That I don't know.
I was just curious who is going to be the one. Is it going to be the citizens of Walker County pay that millage rate for the school, or is it going to be the hotel?
I don't know what the hotel would pay as far as the tax rate. I know that if you're a property owner and there's not some kind of an agreement otherwise, that's what you would pay.
Well, we didn't ask for it. We didn't want it up there. I still don't want it up there.
I don't either.
I mean, we live up there. We don't want it stuff like,
Yeah.
we wouldn't ask.
So say we could build something on there, could we get the county to pay our taxes for 30 years and our millage for the school for 30 years?
Yeah, get a lot of them little houses up there.
I mean, I'm just curious.
That I don't know.
We're
I
being
wouldn't
sucked
answer
to
for
death, really,
the
is the
chairman.
bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, we can't grow because it's constantly going somewhere else. Somebody else needs it.
You're talking about people like moving into Walker County because it's better. I personally know several people that moved out of Walker County because of this courthouse.
Yeah.
They just believed it's dry, and they went to a county where they could actually live and not be just stressed out all the time, wondering, okay, am I going to lose my house?
Some of them go to Ridgeland because of all the stuff at the Department of Cross from it. They're moving out and getting.
Other
another
questions?
school system.
Questions for the board? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions,
So what's the bottom line? What was this meeting for? What exactly did it accomplish? You all had already determined what you were going to do.
We set a proposed rate, sir. We set a proposed rate. That proposed rate has to be voted on by the board. After listening to the presentations and talking to people, if they choose to go lower than that, they can, or they can hold right there. That's what the meetings are about, is to provide you information, answer.
There's maybe 1,000 for the population of Walker County here right now. Most people didn't even know this was going to happen.
If they didn't look at the newspaper or the website or social media, they probably didn't.
I don't look at
You're right.
I don't look
You're
at
right.
computer because I don't
Yeah.
like it.
You're right.
Everybody don't have internet.
I agree, yeah.
But we was just here, just saying we was here.
No.
Because they're going to vote, no matter what we decide, they're going to vote what they want.
But we're here to say that we don't agree with it.
And I appreciate you coming and expressing that. I truly do.
No, we want to see some action.
Yeah.
We get tired of this stuff. I personally am tired of it. I'm tired of seeing governments at any level wasting hard-working people's tax dollars because of mismanagement.
I would love to have a conversation with you, sir, about what that mismanagement is in the school system.
Everybody needs to hear it.
No, I mean, you're bringing it up. So what's the mismanagement?
I don't know the specifics. I just know for a fact it's happening.
So it's a fact, but
And then
it's
you
no
got people,
specifics.
just like out of
It's government on every level.
Okay, and I agree with part of that. I do. But what I'm talking about specifically is the school system and mismanagement. I would like for you to tell me what that is.
They're catering to the people out there that's moving in. It's their second and third vacation homes that have big money, and they're being catered to, and the people that live around there, the so-called locals, are the ones that's having to put up with the baloney, all the traffic and everything, and then here the property rates are raised based on what the value of the homes in that Macklemore.
And I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but that goes back to you, the commissioner. All that's tied to the commissioner's office.
But it don't matter. It's at every level, in every department.
I know.
In every
And
department.
that's the thing, is Shannon should be here too, but he don't have the balls to show up because he's a snake.
There is a meeting at 6:30, right across the street. The commissioners' meeting is tonight at 6:30. So, voice that opinion that there is a public speak at the commissioners'
Well,
meeting.
thankfully, he's on his way out. We're going to see what this new league guy's about. I'm glad he's on his way out.
Because there's a lot of them.
okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second. All those in favor? We are adjourned.
So when we come and don't have no say-so, if this
What
passes,
is
it
the
off.